Good afternoon, and what a privilege to be here in this special place. Thank you, Pastor Royston Smith. Thank you, church board members. Thank you, singers. You heard wonderful music by people that I admire, and oftentimes you see on BBC, praise and worship. Thank you so much for having me with you today. I would like to say a word of encouragement for the media team. You are absolutely amazing, beyond any expectation. Your commitment, your passion, your professionalism, I want to honor that by recognizing you today. Well done. May God bless you, and may the fruits of your work be somehow known to you, be known to you in, I don't know, maybe not so distant future. Well done, and God bless you. Thank you for the invite. I would like to try to fit into your main theme, lessons from the Exodus. I would like to read to you 9 verses that I'm not going to analyze in detail, but you find them in Exodus chapter 23. Do not spread false reports. Do not help a guilty person by being a malicious witness. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd. And this will be the main verse that I'm going to look at this afternoon. And do not show favoritism to a poor person in a lawsuit. If you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to return it. In today's world would be a Ferrari, Maserati, something like that. But you got the message. If you see the donkey of someone who hates you fallen down under its load, do not leave it there. Be sure you help them with it. Do not deny justice to your poor people in their lawsuits. Have nothing to do with a false charge, and do not put an innocent or honest person to death. For I will not acquit the guilty. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see and twists the words of the innocent. Do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners, because you were foreigners in Egypt. I was driving in Kenya from a pretty big city, Kisumu, towards a village. And I had in the car with me 4 kids, 2 of them whom I was about to baptize in the next couple of hours. All of a sudden, after passing over a bridge, I get pulled over by the police, and they ask me, do you have any idea why we stopped you? I said, no, I'm absolutely oblivious why you stopped me. And the lady, police officer, said, speeding. I said, wow, I'm in trouble. How fast was I going? She said, 90. 90 on what? She said, 40. I said, I'm in trouble. And then she said, go and speak with our boss. And the boss, you can recognize him because he was carrying a baton, that kind of things that gives him authority. And I was waiting in a queue, basically, because there were lots of cars stopped there. And I'm the only Muzungu, the only white person in the queue. I finally get to speak with this police officer. He looks at me. I'm dressed in a black shirt and black trousers. And he says, what are you doing here? I said, I've been pulled over and I've been asked to come to talk to you. What did you do? I said, what I've done is so bad that I think you're going to have to throw me in jail. In the United States, if you go 40 miles over the speed limit, first they put you in jail and then they ask you, what's your name? And he smiled and said, no, we don't put people in jail here in this country. He asked me, do you have a Kenyan license? I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't have a Kenyan license. I have a British license. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. He says, I have 2 options for you. One is I have to take you to the police station and give you a written warning and a reprimand. He says, the second one would be to give you a court date. to go before a judge where you would be able to present your case. And he said, that's it? You run out of options? He said, unfortunately, yes. Can I suggest a third option to you? I said, okay, yes. Let me go. And he looked at me, what do you mean, let me go? He said, look, I'm a minister. I'm going in a village not far from here. I have these kids in the car. I'm going to perform a baptism. By the way, the Seventh Day Adventist Church is very well known in that country, in Kenya. He looks at me and he says, you know what? I would let you go. But do you see all these brothers of mine, Kenyans? What do you think they would say if I let you go, a white man, and I charge them? I said, that is your problem, but let me go. He said, I cannot let you go without charging you. I said, did I say that I want you to let me go and not to charge me? And then the penny dropped. He said, let me go, please. Went back to the car, to my backpack, took a 20-pound note because I didn't have Kenyan shillings. Went back to the lady that stopped me. She put me in the car. I give her the 20-pound note. She gives me my credentials, pastoral credentials, I have to say, and my driving license. I kiss her hand like we do back in Romania, and off I went. I get to the school to tell them the story. And they are looking at me like I'm coming from a different planet. Simply because they did not think that what I've just done was acceptable within the Seventh Day Adventist Church and within the school and within the culture that is being kind of promoted by Westerners going there into that country. Basically, bribing is a sin. And it says here, do not accept a bribe. I did not see yet a verse where it says, do not give bribe. So I think I'm a bit safe, you know. So it says not to accept bribes. So Pastor Royston Smith, myself, we don't get bribes for you become an elder or something in the church, you know. So we are safe. But what about giving bribes? And I was telling them the story, you know, bribing people is lifestyle. In here, in Kenya, in Africa, and where I come from, it used to be. It goes as bad as we used to bribe the authorities to let us go with Bibles inside the country. And they were looking at me again like I was coming from a different planet. Because the other Westerners that went there, they would tell them that bribing is bad, is a sin. And I am not preaching to you today to support bribing. No, do not do it, please, unless you are about to do a baptism and the police stops you for speeding. This is one of the most ignored passages in the scripture. A passage so pregnant in meaning that we would need a whole year to study every aspect of this passage alone. In 9 verses, the poor are mentioned twice in almost opposite instances. In verse 3, the poor should not be shown favoritism just because he is poor. And 3 verses down, in verse 6, we are told not to deny justice to someone just because of their financial status. We know many stories of poor people imprisoned for the crimes of others, simply because they couldn't afford a lawyer. Or a black person jailed just because of the color of their skin. The internet, that is full of such stories, tragic stories. In Romania, where I come from, there were gypsies, poor gypsies, I might say, like so poor that they cannot afford a passport to come to London to pickpocket me and you, honorable people. They are so poor that they would take upon themselves crimes they did not commit. And they would serve 6 months up to 5 years in prison, somebody else's crime. They would serve in prison for somebody else's crime. It almost became like a job, you know, and that would be a great deal because the police would resolve the case, they would report the case solved, somebody would go to jail, the offender will be free, and the family of this poor gypsy would have food on the table during that time. That's how bad life could be sometimes. And by the way, in my travels through Africa, and there are many in recent years, I'm yet to find a local church elder who is poor. I wonder why. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd. We have become so obsessed with defending the Ten Commandments that you find 3 chapters earlier than this passage, and the Sabbath, that we have totally forgotten justice and mercy. The subtitle of this passage in the New International Version is Laws of Justice and Mercy. And I wonder, where have I heard these 2 concepts put together? And I remembered where. In Micah chapter 6. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. How many times you gave your vote to Disfellowship, a girl who got pregnant out of the wedlock? How many times you came back to me and quoted Deuteronomy, chapter 22. And I'm going to read in your hearing from verse 20. If, however, the charge is true and no proof of the young woman's virginity can be found, she shall be brought to the door of her father's house, and there the men of her town shall stone her to death. She has done an outrageous thing in Israel by being promiscuous while still in her father's house. You must purge the evil from among you. And how many times we become purgers of evil, because that's what the Bible tells us. And then I'm told, you know what, Pastor? Here in London, in Wimbledon, where I pastor, or in Croydon, we do not stone these young ladies anymore. We discipline them by disfellowshipping them. It is a redemption process. We make a statement to the world how pure we are. That is how mercy looks like to us. Anything less than the ultimate punishment is mercy to us. And I am wondering, why was Jesus so calm, so peaceful, when they brought to him the women caught in the act of prostitution? And maybe because there is no merit in arguing. Maybe because proving someone wrong doesn't really help. Explaining to them that along with her, the man should be brought over too and stoned, facing the same fate, would have fallen on deaf ears. Maybe because Jesus knew they came with the passage of the Torah ready, like the one that I've just read to you. And because of no matter what I would say, there will be a counter-argument somewhere in the Bible, or on the unwritten spirit of prophecy. You know what that is? The one that exists only in our blurred memory. Those passages that we think exist somewhere because we vaguely remember a pastor saying it from the pulpit about 25 years ago. Maybe Jesus did not say a word because there might be instances in our lives when we don't have to say words to show mercy. We just have to do it. And Jesus starts writing in the sand. When I was a young teenager, a young lad, growing up in communism in Romania, being an Adventist was hard enough as it was. And my mom was very concerned about my well-being, about my future. And thankfully, there was a gentleman, there was a guy in my church that put together a singing group. Not as big as Croydon Choir, but it was a singing group. And because of his influence upon me, and because of my activity with this singing group, yeah, don't ask me to sing, by the way. That was like 30-some years ago, 35 years ago. I can safely say that along with my mother's influence, along with other church people's influence, along with some pastors, relatives, my grandparents, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, I am a Seventh Day Adventist today. But my sister is not. My sister is not. My sister is not in the church. She left a while ago. And because she didn't have the chance to be part of this group. So I can say that was a defining factor for my spiritual life, right? Now, this guy whom I love dearly, by the way, that it was then when I was part of the first media evangelism ministry ever. What we've done back then, we've recorded audio, a book, Project Sunlight, by John Strong, which is written in a play format. And we recorded it, and we would give it to people on 6 tapes. I don't know how many of you have tapes, and I don't know how many of you can play those tapes anymore. But I can tell you for a fact that many people came to Christ because of those tapes. So that was like nearly 40 years ago, and that was my first media evangelism project. It happens that this man became a little bit too extreme regarding some aspects of our faith. In particular, he was so passionate about the righteousness by faith concept, 1888 General Conference, and he became being very passionate about it, promoting these aspects to a point that he wrote a book, and he was questioned by our theologians back in Romania in the church administration. They found nothing to worry about. There's nothing wrong with being passionate about the concept of righteousness by faith. But it came a point where the local pastor wanted to get rid of him, and they wanted to disfellowship him. And my mom called me, and she said, on Sabbath we are going to have a business meeting to discuss disfellowshipping your friend. And I asked her, what are you going to do? And there was silence. I said, if I were you, although the writing is on the wall, yeah? When the church comes after you, there's no escape, Pastor Royston. Yeah? So no matter where you hide, the church will find you. So the writing was on the wall. But I told my mom, listen, it would be good for you to stand up and express your opinion. Say it with your lips. And then when the vote happens, you give the vote accordingly. Long story short, I talked to her on the Sunday after. As I said, the writing was on the wall. I knew what was going to happen. And I said, what did you do? And she said to me, I abstained. I love my mom. I really do. She's a great, great, great lady. But I'm wondering, what did the church do to us? What did the church do to us? Do not side with the crowd. We had forgotten that. Why? Because we are here on a Sabbath day and we keep the Ten Commandments. We had forgotten that siding with the crowd is not the best way forward. And although nothing may happen, you still have to express your position. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd. Siding with the crowd. And I am convinced that in the kingdom, you and I will be able to meet some of those who shouted from the top of their lungs, "Crucify him!" Some of them will be in the kingdom, I'm sure. And they shouted from the top of their lungs simply because they were not theologians. Nothing to do with blasphemy. Most of them, I believe they didn't even know what the word blasphemy means. Like today, if you ask most of the young people what blasphemy means, I'm not going to tell you. Look up the dictionary. By the way, if you are watching, from wherever you're watching. They were simply ignorant people who can do nothing on their own unless there is a crowd to follow. I would love to sit down with them to listen to their story of redemption. How they were able to accept Jesus, to accept Jesus' forgiveness, and to forgive themselves as well. I'd like to believe, and I do believe with all my heart, that Jesus' prayer, "Father, forgive them because they are ignorant," that was an answered prayer. If there is a lesson from the story of Exodus, by the way, there's a documentary, a film that I totally recommend. It's about Moses on revelationmedia.com. You can watch it freely. If there's a lesson that Pastor Vili, I've learned from this passage, that lesson sounds like this. The Seventh Day Adventist Church is not the promised land. The Seventh Day Adventist Church is the wandering in the wilderness. Because our natural inclinations, our human inclinations, are lying, stealing, showing favoritism, like the passage says, denying justice, denying mercy, twisting, and oh yes, we are the best at twisting. I am an expert. Pastor Vili, am an expert in twisting. We do not oppress the foreigners, we just ignore the refugees. Will we ever learn the lesson? The Seventh Day Adventist Church is today in the Exodus stage. We got out of a great disappointment about 170 years ago, and we find ourselves stuck into our own wilderness conspiracy theories. We still argue about the obvious. What day of the week is the Sabbath? Simply because we refuse to celebrate it. We cannot enjoy it unless there are some restrictions attached to it. We are waiting Jesus to return to take us home with absolutely no intentions to live the kingdom's values here and now. And if Pastor Vili goes into the pulpit and prophesies, none of you will be alive to see Jesus returning on the clouds of heaven, but your grandchildren and those whom you disfellowshipped and marginalized and ignored, only those who, like Joshua and Caleb, are in the minority will be alive to see Jesus. Have you ever considered the fact that the Exodus was not decided by a vote? It was entirely God's decision. Have you ever thought about the wandering in the wilderness, on the other hand? That it was entirely a business meetings vote. It was a self-declared sentence. Not only a vote, but shouting, threatening, resigning. Let us go back. Let's fire Moses. We need a leader that will take us back. And let me make a confession here. That is probably what keeps me still in the Seventh Day Adventist Church. And that's why I'd rather watch this church crumbling from inside, like Joshua and Caleb, rather than picking up my stuff and leaving. It's easy to go back to Egypt. And Egypt may seem attractive. But I know Egypt too, because I've been there. It's not a place to go back, believe me. Joshua and Caleb stayed in spite of being right. They stayed because they were right. And if we work a simple arithmetic here, I would say even simplistic. 600,000 men left Egypt. None of them entered the promised land except 2. 40 years mean approximately 40 years. That's for another sermon. It means 14,400 days. 14,400 days. 600,000 men divided by 4,000 days gives us a rough average of 41.67 funerals a day. How many of us can bear such? Pastor and I, sometimes I had weeks I had to conduct 3 funerals, and it's really emotionally draining. 41.67 funerals a day. If you were Joshua and Caleb, you would wake up in the morning, look in the obituary, and say, Joshua, you go to this funeral, I'm going to go to the other. 39 will still remain unattended. You are tormented because you don't know whose funeral you're supposed to attend first. And you hope that one day God will show up and reverse that sentence, so you may live and see it with your own eyes. 40 years of thinking back to your own insanity, siding with the crowd, voting with the majority. I would like to conclude today by telling you another story. And I don't like sharing other people's stories. I share my own stories. I was studying at the Theological Institute. I did not study pastoral theology. I studied Adventist theology and Romanian literature. And that gave me a little bit of a freedom. One day, a couple of my colleagues came to me and say, Vili, we've never been on a stadium before. I was working at a certain position at the time, and I had the possibility to obtain tickets to this football game. It was a friendly, Romania-Belgium, I remember. And because it was a friendly, the initial time of the game was changed from after the Sabbath, half an hour inside the Sabbath hours. And I told them, listen, you did not pay anything for these tickets. It's up to you. If you want to go, I'll go with you. If you don't want to go, no love lost. But they were so, two of them were studying particularly for ministry, and it was myself and another friend of mine that was studying business at the time. So the four of us went to that game. I told them, listen, it would be wise if you don't share this with anyone. But it's difficult when you do something amazing you never done before. How can you keep it to yourself? That's why you do it, basically, to share with others. Sure enough, on Monday, we are given the verdict. The two guys that were studying particularly for ministry, pastoral ministry, were unequivocally and without appeal kicked out, with the possibility to come back in a year or two. Myself and my other friend, who was studying business, were invited to the principal's office. The principal was a man. In today's world, he would be one that was born in a Seventh Day Adventist family, left the church when he was 15, 16, and he came back after the revolution in his 60s. But now he is probably the most prominent academic of the Seventh Day Adventist Church, so they appointed him to be the principal of the theological seminary. I'm saying this to say that his connection with this church business, voting, church manual, it was a little bit far-fetched from him. And I went with fear in his office. Fear not because of him, but it was more like shame. What have I done? Was it worth? Was it worth for that half an hour? And I was thinking, you know how these people think. You put yourself in a situation that you should have not put yourself in. And I went very humble into his office. And he looked at me and he said, hey, I am not here to judge you. I am not here to punish you. What I am going to do is to simply tell you, go and sin no more, like Jesus did. I've never felt this mixture of feelings of shame and happiness and Jesus in between. So sometimes it takes someone that is not really the true traditional church manual scholar Adventist that shows mercy and grace. And it was then when I made a promise to myself that if I'm given the privilege to be in ministry, I would first use mercy, and only if necessary, it's absolutely necessary, use justice. And that is costing me a lot even today. Because it's not easy. It's easy to do a sermon, but wait until you face the rage of the people. Because the crowd will always be the crowd. But allow me to tell you, please, I would not change it. Because I'm not afraid of the crowd. While I was driving here, I heard on the radio that Ms. Patel will not change the law. So if you are planning to protest these days, you are going to face the consequences. And I said, to my mind, where is that protest happening? Because I want to go. I really do. Because I do believe that ladies in this country should be protected. And it is also my fault that they feel like they're not. Please, don't side with the crowd. Stay with the word. It is the safest. And if anyone comes to you, or let me say it, if anyone comes at you with it, let me tell you, don't be afraid. You will find enough justice and mercy in this book to help you stand against the crowd. And you will never, ever be defeated. We are yet to get into the promised land. But for the time we are wandering in London, in this world, let us love justice and let us do mercy, because that is what the true religion is. May God bless you and may God keep you. Let's pray. And now, Lord, I want to thank you for the lessons of mercy that even in the most challenging time of your people's history, you were able to teach them that mercy triumphs over judgment. And now unto him who is able to protect you, to keep you safe from the crowd, to keep you tall and standing on your own feet because of the word of God. To him be honor and glory and majesty, now and forevermore. Amen.